Chapter 1889 Sad Little Arrow. Liang Yu simply couldn't close the distance between himself and Lancelot quickly enough. In terms of supernatural power index, Lancelot is 2,000 points higher than her, which is an indisputable fact. After losing the advantage in close combat, she could only be suppressed by Lancelot's supernatural powers. Distance, how to shorten the distance, this is the most important issue at the moment. The battle between Zhang Yi and King Arthur ended very early, and the two watched the battles on other battlefields with interest. On the one hand, they were competing secretly with each other, and on the other hand, they were worried that they would really kill someone, so they were ready to stop them at any time. Zhang Yi already has a gun in his hand, and he will take action at the critical moment. In the battle on Lancelot's side, Liang Yu was completely at a disadvantage at this time. King Arthur asked with a smile, "Isn't that the martial arts master beside you? I see the same style as you and her." Zhang Yi glanced at him and said, "I have only practiced for 3 years, and she has practiced for almost 30 years. She is a warrior who has all kinds of martial arts skills engraved in her bones. I can't compare to her. If I had her level, you would have been defeated in just 30 moves." King Arthur smiled faintly. "But how can anyone be perfect?" "Oh, it looks like she is going to lose." King Arthur spoke suddenly. Lancelot engaged in a guerrilla fight with Liang Yu, not giving her any chance to get close, and Liang Yu had to struggle hard to break his black flaming sword shadows. Zhang Yi sneered. "I don't think so. She's just waiting for an opportunity." The martial arts master used a move that Liang Yu taught Zhang Yi. When bullying the weak, don't hold back and kill with one strike. When the weak fights the strong, you need to keep a backup plan to avoid being killed, and then wait for the opportunity. Wait until your opponent reveals a flaw, even if it's only for a moment. You must seize it. Then, take the opportunity to fight back. No attack, no defense, just one move. This is a heavy blow in martial arts that can be fatal. Amid Lancelot's mighty sword light, Liang Yu seemed to be struggling to hold on, but in fact there was no panic in her eyes. She is in a state of harmony between man and nature, so she has no fear and is as calm as a mainframe computer with 36 cores. She was observing Lancelot's methods of attack. In order to suppress her and prevent her from getting close, Lancelot used the method of releasing black flame sword light over a large area to suppress her from all directions without any blind spots. This method of attack is to bully the weak and act recklessly by relying on the power of supernatural powers. However, this method also has a disadvantage, which is that it consumes a lot of energy. Every time he launched an attack, there would be a gap of about 2 seconds during which he needed to condense the black flame again. This is where his flaw was exposed. Liang Yu drew a circle in the air with his right hand. The sword light was like moonlight, and a bright moon rose over the sea. The overlapping sword shadows pierced out and collided again with the sword shadows swung by Lancelot. Dang, dang, dang. The strong impact caused her body to move back continuously. She had to use this method to remove the force coming from her arms. Still resisting? How many times can you resist? I'm afraid that the arm holding the sword is about to break. Lancelot's teasing voice came from afar along the waves. He took a deep breath, and the oxygen entered his body and began to be converted into body energy, then supplied his organs, turning the supernatural power into black flames. At this moment, Liang Yu was less than 2 kilometers away from him. This was not within Liang Yu's effective killing range, so Lancelot thought he was very safe. But when Liang Yu caught the movement of his breathing, her eyes dilated instantly, her pupils were as bright as a tiger's, filled with pure devastation. She dropped the sword in her hand, raised her right arm towards Lancelot, pressed her left hand on her forearm, and pushed forward inch by inch. A ray of red light condensed in her meridians and turned into a small arrow, less than 7 inches long. Enhancement-type mutants rarely have the skills to unleash their supernatural powers. Liang Yu's sword energy is completely different from the power of Lancelot or Zhang Yi. That is the energy of a warrior. Liang Yu knew better than anyone that long-range attacks were the weakness of enhanced aliens, so she combined the internal methods of martial arts with the abilities of aliens to create a very lethal long-range attack method, the sad little arrow. Liang Yu pushed her palm forward suddenly, and a small red arrow shot out from her palm. Swoosh! The small arrow flew through the space in an instant, at a speed that was dazzling. Lancelot had been on guard against Liang Yu's use of long-range weapons to attack. This move was within his expectations, but the speed of the sad arrow still surprised him. Come on! He clenched the sword in his hand, his eyes fixed on the incredibly fast arrow, and when the moment came, he slashed out with his sword. However, when the sword was about to hit the arrow, an extremely strange thing happened. The incredibly fast little arrow, the little red arrow condensed from Liang Yu's energy, actually avoided his sword, circled in the air, and hit him directly in the chest. A powerful force exploded directly in Lancelot's chest. He did not have armor as strong as Zhang Yi's, and could not block the sad little arrow that Liang Yu shot with his concentrated energy. For an instant, he felt an unbearable pain in his chest, and the blood in his body surged. With a puff, blood spurted out of his mouth. Lancelot staggered backwards. Liang Yu would not miss such an opportunity. She lowered her body and rushed towards Lancelot like a black shark. Lancelot wanted to raise his sword to fight again, but he had already missed the opportunity, and Liang Yu would not give him the chance to fight back. The sword light was like moonlight, sweeping across the vast ocean. He raised his knight's sword to block, but he was slow with every step. The sword in his hand was getting heavier and heavier. Every time he wanted to fight back, Liang Yu's sword would always pierce him 1, 2, or 3 steps faster than him. His combat uniform, his arrogant fallen amber flame, along with his arrogance and self-esteem, were ruthlessly cut off by Liang Yu. Zhang Yi slowly raised the corners of his mouth and glanced at King Arthur beside him. King Arthur's eyes were a little gloomy. Lancelot actually lost to Liang Yu? This result made him very unhappy. The vice-captain of the Knights of the Round Table, even if he is a loser, cannot lose so badly outside. It seems like I have to give this guy a good training after I get back. Compared to Liang Yu, Huahua's battle with Percival ended faster. Under the condition of the same supernatural power index, if humans want to defeat cats in close combat, I am afraid that only a very small number of geniuses can do it. Obviously, Percival had no such ability. Huahua is a war beast with no weaknesses, whether it is offense or defense, burst or endurance, long range or close combat. Its ferocity makes it the second most powerful force in Zhang Yi's team for quite a long time. There was no suspense at all for Percival as he was pressed directly under Huahua's huge claws. If Yang Xinxin hadn't reminded it that it couldn't eat this thing, it would have almost put Percival in its mouth. My king lost, Percival lost, and Lancelot lost too. Morning night, Tristan covered his head and cried out in pain. It's over, it's over. How are we, the Knights of the Round Table, going to survive in the future? He looked at Merlin, his eyes full of panic. Hey, magician, why don't you do it? Help us save our reputation. Merlin lowered his eyes. At this time, he had basically confirmed his idea in his mind. It's not surprising to lose to them. Team Chaos is the world's top team of Inhumans. They still maintain an undefeated record. He looked at Zhang Yi and King Arthur standing side by side in the distance and said secretly in his heart, such people must never be enemies. We must find ways to bring them into our camp. The other Knights of the Round Table also frowned, feeling sad about the war situation. They never thought that King Arthur would be defeated, let alone that not only King Arthur was defeated, but he also lost 2 of the other 3 battlefields where he wanted to regain his position. It all depends on whether Gawain can help us win back the last bit of face. The dull voice of rebellious knight, Mordred, sounded. The crowd had no choice but to place all their hopes on the last battlefield. At least here, Gawain relied on his attribute advantage to firmly suppress the fat man. For an ice and snow-related alien, once the ice and snow melt, his abilities will become useless. At the very least, Fatty Sue has not yet found the most appropriate means to bring his ice storm within 100 meters of Gawain's body. Gawain was unaware of the situation on other battlefields. While using his abilities to tease Fatty Sue, he silently waited for time to pass. And in the sky behind him, The sun was slowly rising to the zenith. Little friend, I'm waiting for the sun to reach the center of the sky. What are you waiting for? Gawain pointed to the sky with one hand, and a huge fireball formed by the surging flame power emitted an extremely high temperature. The entire sea area was steaming, and many dead fish had floated on the surface of the sea, floating on the water with their white bellies sticking out. Fatty Sue held the nine-toothed rake in both hands. In his first battle after his promotion, he was in a terrible state. Just as Gawain said, the power of Gawain's Eclipse Spear is getting stronger and stronger. By noon, his Eclipse Spear will reach its peak power. By then, will Fatty Sue still be able to hold on? He is having a hard time blocking it now. Fatty Sue was breathing heavily, his eyes fixed on Gawain. At this moment, he had to concentrate on all of Gawain's movements in order to be able to block his attack with difficulty. The Spear of Eclipse appeared again in Gawain's right hand. The scorching heat almost drove people crazy, and the sea water was bubbling. He was like a bodybuilder, raising his hand with an elegant and beautiful posture and throwing the Spear of Eclipse over. Shield wall. Fat Sue immediately condensed ice and snow, and a huge iceberg rose up from the sea with a boom, blocking him. But in front of the Spear of Eclipse, it could only block it for a moment. There was no need for the two to come into contact with each other, and a huge hole was melted in the iceberg. Passing through the iceberg, heading straight for Fatty Sue. This guy is really strong. Zhang Yi couldn't help but sigh. Sun Knight. Gawain is the purest form of energy-releasing mutant. Fire is the most primitive and powerful form of energy release that humans can master. If it weren't for the influence of climate, his strength would be much stronger. Fatty Sue clenched his teeth. He knew everyone was looking at him. Oh. He swung the nine-toothed rake in his hand to block the Spear of Eclipse. Crash. The weapon formed by solid ice also reached its limit and was finally unable to block Gawain's attack, and shattered in an instant. The Spear of Eclipse hit Fatty Sue's chest hard, knocking him far away, and finally fell into the sea with a plop. If Fatty Sue hadn't been protected by his armor, this blow would have taken most of his life. But even so, when he struggled to freeze the surrounding seawater and climbed onto the ice, you could clearly see blood dripping from the corners of his mouth. King Arthur said to Zhang Yi, "The mechanical engineer in your family is really amazing. Chaos, can I discuss something with you?" He took a fancy to the armor used by the aliens in Zhang Yi's team. In his opinion, the biggest loss they suffered this time was their weapons. Including his loss to Zhang Yi, it was also because of this. The improvement that the battle armor brings to the alien is too strong. Although Liu Karen did not participate in the battle, she has greatly enhanced all her companions. Zhang Yi said calmly, "We can negotiate, but you have to pay a sufficient price in exchange." He knew that King Arthur was interested in the armor made by Liu Karen. There is no way. Few countries in the world have the courage to give resources to a technician who cannot directly participate in combat in a short period of time. Basically, in order to quickly stabilize the domestic situation, they would choose to prioritize the cultivation of combat aliens with immediate combat capabilities. However, the further you go in the future, the greater the role of the technology tree and auxiliary ability users become. King Arthur's eyes lit up. Okay. It's okay to talk about something. It's nothing more than the exchange of interests. After Fatty Sue got up, his legs were trembling slightly. Gawain looked at him with pity. It's time to end. How can ice and snow withstand the scorching sun? You have nothing to regret if you lose to me. The sun had already reached the center of the sky, and Gawain was about to launch the most powerful attack. Fat Sue coughed weakly twice. He reached out to cover his mouth, but blood still flowed out. But at this moment, he had no time to care about his injuries, but looked up at the sky. Let's take a gamble. He spread his arms and leaned his body back, as if embracing the sky. Gawain's eyes widened at the sight. Have you completely given up hope? Well, in that case, I will let you leave as a warrior. He raised his hands high, and at this moment, his strength reached its strongest state. Flames were boiling around his body, like a solar crown swirling above the sun, or like a dazzling flaming bathrobe. He put his palms together, and the sun above his head went out in his palms. After a moment's silence, this power transformed into a dazzling golden eclipse spear in his palm. Fatty Sue stared into the sky, his eyes gradually turning a shade of blue. The ice and snow alien is the darling of the Ice Age. Boss, I always believed in your words. Fatty Sue's abilities are somewhat different from Mirana's. He can directly control the ice, frost, and snow between heaven and earth. It wasn't until he broke through Ipsilon that he truly realized what his abilities were. That means you can communicate with the celestial phenomena. When Gawain was about to make a move, a deafening roar suddenly came from behind him. Boom! The sky became dark and the sun was blocked. He turned his head and found that the sky was now covered with dark clouds. The thick black clouds were stacked up like mountains gathering above the battlefield. What? Gawain's pupils shrank suddenly. He didn't remember that the fat man in front of him had such ability. Damn it, what kind of weatherman is this? Yang Xinshin, who had been watching the battlefield, saw through it all. I see. Uncle Yu scratched his head. Miss Yang, what happened? Why did the weather suddenly change? Yang Xinshin explained. Gawain's power comes from the sun, so covering the sky can weaken his power. Also, Su Chunlei has been deliberately creating a rainstorm. Didn't you notice? We all know that ice and snow attacks cannot get close to Gawain's body, and no matter how hard the ice and snow are, they will be melted into water without any attack power. So, what is the purpose of continuous attack? Naturally, it creates a lot of steam above the battlefield. Then, create a low-temperature field in the sky to allow the steam to condense. This is how rainstorms are formed. Gawain found that his strength had weakened, and there was nothing he could do about it. The power obtained from the sun will also weaken as the sky is obscured. Crash. Heavy rain poured down, and the blazing flames on Gawain's body were also suppressed by the celestial phenomena. Fatty Sue roared, glared at Gawain, and said, Now, it's finally my turn, right? Gawain glared at Fatty Sue. You guy. He slapped Fatty Sue hard with his right hand, and the raging flames turned into huge fireballs. Hundreds of fireballs formed a bright scene in the sky. How can such a small amount of rain extinguish the fire in my heart? Countless fireballs fell towards the earth like meteors. But now, this is my home court. Fatty Sue sneered. The power of the flames in the rainstorm was greatly weakened and could no longer pose a fatal threat to Fatty Sue. He raised his hand, and a huge iceberg rose from the sea to block all the fireballs. It's over. Yang Xinshin made an assertion about the battle. As long as their battle continues, Su Chunlei can continue to create artificial rain. Gawain's ability attribute advantage will disappear, and the geographical advantage will no longer exist. Then failure is inevitable. The battle situation was exactly as Yang Xinshin said. The fire-type alien's power was greatly weakened in the heavy rain, and he could no longer cause effective damage to Fatty Sue. If Gawain needs to consume 200% of the energy to cause the same degree of damage, then Fatty Sue, who has the advantages of time and place, only needs 30%. This is an ice sea, a world of extremely low temperatures. He doesn't even need to consume much energy, as there is an endless supply of ice and snow to use. Gawain's flame gradually dimmed, and he finally chose to face failure calmly. I lost. This was just a competition. Gawain kept a balanced mentality and did not fight to the death with Fatty Sue. Chunlei, well done. Uncle Yu couldn't help but applaud loudly. Everyone looked at the very embarrassed fat man on the battlefield, and their eyes were filled with appreciation. Although the victory was a bit embarrassing, it was already pretty good as the first battle after the promotion. Yang Xinshin couldn't help but nodded. After all, this is the darling of the Ice Age. On the side of the Knights of the Round Table, everyone looked as if they had lost their parents. They sighed and didn't want to talk. It's so shameful. Today I've really embarrassed myself. Gawain landed on the sea, smiled, and stretched out his right hand to Fatty Sue. Although I have never seen you before, from now on, you deserve to be remembered by me, the Sun Knight Gawain. Fatty Sue wiped the black dust off his face, smiled, and shook hands with him. "Remember, I am Marshal Tian." The two shook hands with mutual respect, and then Fatty Su couldn't wait to rush back to the Gene phone. After coming back, he swallowed, looked at everyone and asked, "How did I play?" Hua and Liang Yu had already come back, and everyone gathered around him, watching with smiles on their faces. "Not bad, Chunlei. I didn't expect you to be so capable. It's not a waste of my brother's training of you for so long. I've always said that our team needs a strong ice and snow expert. Now the gap has finally been filled." Everyone patted Fatty Su's shoulders and chest, speaking with smiles, all of which were praise. Cough, cough. He. Fat Su coughed and smiled smugly. Zhou Kier put her hand on his shoulder and helped him heal his injury. This time, the two alien teams competed against each other, but unexpectedly, it ended with Zhang Yi's team being completely defeated. But as King Arthur said, Zhang Yi and his men had too great an advantage in terms of armament. There is no way. People are known by the company they keep. Due to Zhang Yi's stable character and his expertise in defense, the weapons used by all members of his team also have strong defensive capabilities. The two teams' levels of supernatural powers are similar, so at this time, upgrading their equipment becomes particularly critical. Zhang Yi turned around, stretched out his hand to King Arthur and said, "After this battle, I hope that our past grievances can be wiped out. Your brother's matter is a matter of right and wrong on the battlefield. If you are willing, let it go. We can be friends in the future." King Arthur looked at the black bracelet on Zhang Yi's hand. There was no other way at this point. It is his honor to be able to be by your side, even if it is in an alternative way. The two clasped their hands together, and at this moment, the past grudges were finally wiped out. Zhang Yi now has one less major worry and no longer needs to worry about being retaliated against. But unexpectedly, the next moment, King Arthur mentioned another matter. "By the way, I have another purpose for coming here this time." Zhang Yi raised his eyebrows and signaled King Arthur to continue. King Arthur released his hand. "I believe you already know the existence of the Hitomi organization, and I am also a member of the organization. Dear viewers, thanks for staying with me. We'll try to get you more updates. Please like and subscribe and share the video with your friends. Love you all."